Bruce, just delving into that newsletter topic a bit more, if someone watching this hasn't launched a newsletter yet but wants to, what would be the top things you would, advise that they need to factor in and get right in order to launch successfully and have that newsletter go on to be, valuable and successful?
The biggest single thing, and most people don't realize this, the biggest single thing is LinkedIn is going to send the invitation to all your connections and followers once. When you publish your very first issue, LinkedIn will send out the invitation. So it's absolutely critical that the title of your newsletter and your subheader explicitly says what's in it for your prospective readers. Every day I receive an invitation for someone's newsletter, and it'll be Rob's newsletter. And I'll go, what's in it for me? Why would I want to subscribe to that? Right? It'll be, thinking, thoughts on something or other. And I would go, that's not compelling type thing. I mean, this is one of the big advantages I have is that I was one of the early people that was invited to do a newsletter. So I was very lucky. I was very fortunate because LinkedIn did a lot of promotion for me because I was one of the few people that had a newsletter a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. It's been, for most other folks, they miss out on that, and they don't realize that, and I think they lose that. They lose a lot of opportunities, or a lot of people that could have subscribed in that very first notification. They miss them because they just have a generic title, and the title is really, really important. That's the single biggest thing, because it can make a difference of, if you have, say you've got 2,000 followers, if it makes a difference of 10%, there's 200 people that you could have had as subscribers that you missed out on because of the way you named your newsletter.
And another angle that's quite new, which can help with that, is LinkedIn now allow you to have up to 5 newsletters per profile. So if your audience comprises people in various different sectors or various different interests, originally you could only publish one newsletter with one title. And so you're trying to sort of appeal to everyone. Whereas now it's quite possible to say, my newsletter about this is called this, and my newsletter about that is called something else. And only the portions of your network who are interested in each of those topics is then going to subscribe. But then you can be much more laser focused in what that newsletter is going to be about as well.
Right. For example, I've considered having a newsletter for sales and then having one for marketing, or having one that is more for salespeople using things like Services Sales Navigator, and having another one that is purely about content on LinkedIn and engaging with people on LinkedIn with your content, that sort of thing. But it is work. It does require work in two ways. One is you do have to, because I am publishing regularly. Like I said, you don't have to, but I publish every Tuesday. And so it does take time every week for me to put together my newsletter, write the newsletter, edit it, put it together, and get it on LinkedIn and schedule it, type thing. So that is time consuming. And the other aspect is that you want to engage with the people that engage with your content. So that when I publish on Tuesday morning, I want to be available for the next 3 or 4 hours anyway to be able to respond to comments. And probably more than anything, I write enough content. Typically these days, I write 4 articles a week. I only publish one on LinkedIn. The other ones I publish in my email newsletter. If I were to do 4 of those on LinkedIn every week, I would have to start devoting a lot more time to not just hanging around, but being available to respond to comments. I just don't have the time for that right now. It's just, it's just not right. So, but that's something you do have to take into account. And that's really, you do have to take that into account with whatever format you're using. If you are going to publish or post on LinkedIn, is that you should be around after the fact to respond to the people that engage with your content.
Yeah, absolutely. That links in with a question we've had through, which is asking, how successful is your tactic of sending extra content in your email version of your newsletter?
Good, that gets me customers. I do, and you can see this if you see my newsletter on LinkedIn this morning. I put a teaser at the bottom, and I go, here's what I'm going to talk about next week in my LinkedIn newsletter, and here are the 4 things I'm going to talk about next week in my email newsletter. And then there's a link to go to my website and sign up for my email newsletter. And it's good because it's more of what I say on LinkedIn. And to be fair, I'm a little bit more opinionated in my email newsletter than I feel comfortable being on LinkedIn. It's a little bit too much of biting the hand that feeds you. So I tend to just have my more acidic stuff tends to be in the email newsletter than it is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I like doing that because it brings me people, and then they get a lot of content, and they can decide what they want to read and what they don't want to read. But that usually is the escalation. People escalate. I've got 27,000 people in my on my LinkedIn subscribed to my LinkedIn newsletter. I've got 800 people subscribed to my email newsletter, and I get a lot of clients from the email newsletter because they're just exposed to so much more content on mine.
And I suppose they've indicated that they are your most avid.
And I get
what you put out there, yeah.
And I get typically low 40s is my open rate on my email newsletter, low 40%. So 40, 42, 43 type thing. Yeah.
Which is really good for an email newsletter.